Hi, Jesse. It's your sister in Hyatt and also fellow Bruce fan, Sylvan from Vermont. I'm calling to say 1,000 episodes. Wow! It boggles the mind. I first heard that you were looking for a guest for John Hyatt Month on Set Listing Bruce, and of course I wanted to be part of it. I felt so incredibly honored just to join you once, and I dug into the back episodes of Set Listing, really enjoying that. And then we decided to undertake what I thought was this huge endeavor of the Perfectly Good podcast. As you've explained, this is taking the idea of Rob Carmack and J.B. Clark's Springsteen Sings the Alphabet, going through John Hyatt's catalog from A to Z. And honestly, I thought you might be a little crazy because that was signing up for over 300 episodes. But silly me, you knew what you were asking. You've now done 1,000 episodes. It's crazy. The funny thing is, the more I talk with you and the more I listen to your other projects, the more fortunate I feel. You have such a gift for sharing your ideas and your passion. And maybe more impressive than that, you have this gift for getting other folks to open up and have these fascinating conversations. Plus, you get it all down on the computer and up into the interwebs. It's such a gift to your guests and your listeners. You are truly a master of the yes and we should all be a little better at that. I am so lucky to be riding that Cadillac with Tennessee plates next to you. You prove all the time that there's no limit to what can happen when people share a love of music. Congratulations on your first 1,000 episodes of Set Listing Bruce, and thanks for everything, Jesse.
And even going back to like the thing about thinking is important, I also I think I had this concept that like the songwriter was like trying to get a message to me through the lyrics. And so I would sit and like think about them. Like, what does this mean? What does that mean? And then as I got older and the internet came along and I could look stuff up, I actually found out that like 9 times out of 10, it didn't really mean anything. It was just some random phrase that the songwriter liked, but there was a lot of like thinking about music and like I said, and thinking about lyrics, and just that's what we do on the show now is just a thing that I would just do alone in my bedroom, just sort of like think about the lyrics and kind of puzzle them and try to figure them out. And now I know that that's kind of crazy and we just do it for fun, but back then I took it a little bit more seriously.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Set Listing Bruce, your podcast all about Bruce Springsteen, his music, and mostly his fans. I am your host, Jesse Jackson. We are getting off the Bruce train today, though I'm sure he will come up as he normally does. I have Dan McInerney, one of the hosts of my newest podcast obsession, the Story Song Podcast, and tonight he is looking very dapper in his apricot scarf.
Thank you.
As he walks into the podcast like he was walking into a yacht.
I mean, I would kill if I could pull off an apricot scarf. Believe me. If I could have the little tucked in under the collar and have the little page boy hat, I would love it. Yeah. I don't think I could pull it off. You have to be a certain kind of person to be able to walk around like that.
Yes, and listeners, if you're wondering what the hell are they talking about, go check the latest episode of the Story Song Podcast, which takes one of my favorite things in doing a podcast is getting on tangents. And their podcast is a professional tangent-going podcast.
Yeah.
I think
it's possibly just an excuse to go on tangents, I would say.
Exactly right. Yeah. We do. It truly is that one of the things, and it's hilarious, Dan, that every once in a while my guest will go, "Oh, I'm sorry we went on a tangent." I go, "No, this is the best." So all kidding aside, Dan, I am so glad you're here. I am not kidding. I found your podcast last year and have been going through them just going through them as quickly as I can. And what is hilarious is the ones where I go, I don't know that song. I don't know if I'm really going to enjoy it. Like the hack and sack, and
Mhm.
and all of a sudden you guys get into this story that just I'm like, it has nothing to do with the song, and I'm loving this. So thank you for that. You've kept me company going back and forth to visit my mother, and I appreciate it.
Oh, well, you've said such incredibly kind things. We really appreciate it. And it's just so nice to know that, it's this fun little dumb thing we do. And I'm sure I'll talk more about how we kind of came up with it, but
Yeah.
just to hear that, it has helped you out, is maybe, brought a little fun into your life. I know what that's like at times when things are not going so great. So I can't tell you how much it meant to us to hear the things you said.
Well, that is great to hear. So why don't you tell us a little about yourself?
Okay, well, so the podcast, it's called the Story Song Podcast, and what we do is we take a story song, which is, we're pretty liberal of what we consider a story song, but basically a song that has kind of a narrative to it. We love details, and we just break down the lyrics and speculate on things, try to come up with different angles, and usually kind of go way off topic, way off tangent, and basically, like, we make stuff up. Like, if something is possible but is unlikely in a song, we're always going to latch onto that and kind of run with that, and just try to have some fun with it. And then we go through the history of the song and talk about the artist and how the song came to be and stuff. And then usually have some fun with that as well, and just talk about some of the weird stuff that pops up. One of the things I have come to love is doing the research, because you always find just such weird stuff that you just are not expecting, weird connections. It's a ton of fun. We love doing it. And my two co-hosts, Michael and Rachel, we all went to high school together. And basically, the conversations we have on the podcast are essentially what we would talk about, what we do talk about, to be honest, when we're not on the podcast. But what we've been talking about since high school, and we just love, getting into the minutia of pop culture stuff, and just, really digging into it and just kind of talking for hours about it. And so this is kind of one section of our obsession, but it works out nice, because a pop song, rock song is usually 3 minutes, so we can kind of spend 45 minutes breaking it down, which is a lot of fun.
Yeah, I am, one of my other podcasts I'm part of is a Game of Thrones podcast. And we joke about that, we've done a 45-minute episode over a 5-minute trailer. Right.
Yeah.
And so we do. I'm going to get more into that. And I want to know more about you personally. But one of the things that I think is interesting is when my wife and I watched the Ken Burns country music documentary, and I know it sounds like I'm on a tangent, but you saw that everything came from the Carter family and Jimmy Rogers, and just the connections went through these roots. And you guys will talk about that. It's the Archies again. It's Chris Christopherson again. It's why are this all, and of course Joan, who is in every song, whether you know it or not. Joan is there.
Exactly. Yeah. It's funny. There are like these super connectors who keep coming up in the backgrounds. The same names keep coming up. The same situations keep coming up. So it's pretty fun. I mean, we joke about it all the time, but there's even now a couple of like cliches. Like we joke about, like, the band didn't believe in it. Like, literally half the songs we do that were like big #1 hits, the band didn't like the song, they didn't want to put out the song, and then of course, it gets put out and goes up to #1. So but yeah, there's always a lot of stuff like that. And there's just always, like, nobody, that old cliche of, like, everybody wants to take the success has like a million mothers, right? Everyone
Right.
wants to take credit for when something's a success. But yeah, like it's nobody knows what's going to happen before it comes out. Afterwards, everyone's, oh,
Yeah.
I knew all along this was going to be a big
Yeah.
hit, but before it comes out, nobody really knows what's going to happen.
So I don't know if you guys talked. I think you guys did talk a little bit about this when you did Redheaded Stranger. But in that Ken Burns documentary, they had one of the guys in the room and he said on camera, "We got it. We thought it sounded horrible. We said, okay, we're going to release this and it will bomb. And then Willie will have to come back to us, hat in hand, and he will be able to listen to us from then on." Then it's one of the first million-selling country and Western albums of all times. It is a modern classic, and Willie is now almost 100, laughing all the way, continuing to the bank.
Well, and it's someone like Willie Nelson, who's a genius, right? It was something that was so different that it's tough, I think, for people to wrap their head around something that's new, right? And just for the audience at home, I think the story went that it was very sparse. And when the record company got it, they thought it was demos. They thought they were like, "Oh, these are pretty good demos. We can't wait to hear what the real songs are." And Willie Nelson's like, "No, that is the song. That's what we're putting out." So yeah, I mean, that's like a perfect example of just people just not being able to kind of see it until it hits the public and the public eats it up.
Yeah. All right. So where did you grow up and what kind of music did you listen to? What kind of music did your family listen to?
So I grew up on Long Island, New York, which is an interesting place to grow up. Quintessential suburbs, but the New York City is a 45-minute train ride away. So my parents, the music they played around the house, my dad was they're both children of the 60s. My dad was a pretty standard classic rock 60s kind of guy. Beatles, Stones, The Who, all that stuff that I definitely came to appreciate and love. My mom was a little different, and it's actually really a kind of a music that's somewhat forgotten. I think she was a bit of a hippie, but in kind of the original classic sense. She liked folk rock.
Okay.
A lot of folk stuff, a lot of women with long hair and guitars singing, your sort of Joni Mitchell types. So there was a lot of that. And then she liked the 60s girl group stuff. And so I heard a lot of that growing up. I do occasionally talk about driving in the car with my mom, and she would have the oldies radio station on. And I think one thing that's definitely different about me than sort of your average person is, even back when I was a little kid, I was just very observant and was always thinking about stuff. So if I heard a song on the radio, this is kind of like where this sort of a session would start. If I heard a song on the radio, I would just like listen to lyrics and I would just start thinking about them and sort of wondering about stuff. And so, yeah, that's just a lot of it. Like I would sort of notice things. I think my mom has pointed out that I would just sort of, ask her questions about songs, and she was like, "I didn't realize you were even paying attention," and that kind of stuff. And then as I got older, I would do weird stuff. One thing I would do is I would listen to Rick Dees and the Weekly Top 40. This is probably when I was in like 5th, 6th grade. And I'd listen to that, and I had a notebook, and I would write down every song that they played in the top 40. And I would even like make little notes in the margins about it and be like, "Oh, it moved up, 6 spots or whatever." And some of the songs I didn't even really like, or whatever. But it was a weird thing that I can't explain it now, but just at the time, I just felt like it was something important to know. Like, you just, as like an American citizen, you should know what the top 40 songs in America are, and it just, nobody told me to do that. I don't know where that came from, but that was just one of those things that I became obsessed with. And like I said, it just felt important. It just felt like something that you should know. I also like got obsessed with radio and TV and how it was made. And again, I don't know I don't know why. I work in television now as my day job, and I just thought it was just the coolest thing in the world. Just the fact that you could be somewhere else and be doing a thing and broadcast it out, and anyone could pick it up anywhere. It just seemed like the coolest thing, including at my local library. I figured out what the Dewey Decimal System number was for like books about television.
Sure.
And I just went in order and read every single one. I would just get the next one. I would put one back, read that, return it, and get the next one off the shelf. Which included reading things like technical manuals that I probably didn't really understand, or reading books about like I remember reading an entire book about Your Show of Shows, the Sid Caesar like 50s sketch comedy show, which I had never heard of, but still, and didn't know anything about it, but still read an entire book about it. So it was just there was just sort of these weird obsessions that I would sort of glom onto. But music was sort of always a big part of it. And then we joke about on the show, anytime there's an artist who is like a 70s 80s artist, they always have the same story. Tom Petty, all these guys, they saw the Beatles on Ed Sullivan. And I kind of had my I guess my generation version of that, which was I would sneak down in the middle of the night and I would watch 120 minutes on MTV. And I saw what I think was, I can't prove it, but I think was the premiere of the Smells Like Teen Spirit video. I would have been in 8th grade, and it blew my mind. Like I in some ways, again, I don't even know if I even liked it that much. I would come to love it, but it was just so different and so striking, and I just needed to know everything about it. And back then the internet, there was no internet. No. So you had you would go to school the next day and be like, did you guys see that video? And you have to like try to figure it out. And so I eventually, obviously it became a big hit, and I eventually figured it out and bought the album. And then I just kind of started to go down a rabbit hole. And that eventually led to me just getting really into like alternative rock, punk rock, even like indie rock, as I was sort of going through like high school into college, and like alt rock kind of turned into indie rock. But I would ride my bike down to the local 7-Eleven every month, just so I could buy Spin magazine. And I would just read it cover to cover, and just like anything that sounded interesting. I had a job just so I could buy CDs. And every week I would go to the local record store and buy like 2 or 3 CDs, and just listen to them. And, back then when you got a CD, you had spent $19 on it, so you were going to like it. You're going to force yourself to like whatever you got. So yeah, I listened to a lot of that. And I just, and again, cause I was sort of observant, like if I, if I was reading an interview with, I don't know, Soundgarden or whatever in Spin, and they would mention an old band, they would just like toss off, like, just, some old 70s band or something. I would go to the record, I would write it down, or I would just remember it, and then I would go buy that album, and so I found like a ton of weird stuff, from like, the Replacements to Velvet Underground to, lots of weird stuff. So I was always kind of had my ear to the ground. But even when I was in my like most like alt rock punk kind of stage, where I was like, oh, I hate anything that's mainstream. I was also like a terrible punk, because I still was like, I kind of like the Gin Blossoms, or whatever. I would sort of listen to music that like my cool like all rock friends didn't approve of. Sometimes I would do it a little quietly, but so I just always I would just basically listen to anything. And again, even if it was a song I didn't necessarily like, I was just always so fascinated by just how music was made, why certain choices were made in songs. Sure. And even going back to like the thing about thinking is important, I also like, I think I had this concept that like the songwriter was like trying to get a message to me through the lyrics. And so I would just sit and like think about them, like, what does this mean? What does that mean? And then as I got older and the internet came along and I could look stuff up, I actually found out that like 9 times out of 10, it didn't really mean anything. It was just some random phrase that the songwriter liked, but there was a lot of like thinking about music, and like I said, and thinking about lyrics, and just that's what we do on the show now is just a thing that I would just do alone in my bedroom, just sort of like think about the lyrics and kind of puzzle them and try to figure them out. And now I know that that's kind of crazy and we just do it for fun, but back then I took it a little bit more seriously.
So one of the things I'm thinking of is when you hear, and I'm going back to Ken Burns, like the baseball documentary that Doris Kirshen will talk about. She would listen to the day game and would do the scores and would, write down. She would keep a score sheet and would have all the stats, and she would tell her dad when he got home, not realizing that it was going to be in the newspaper, So you're doing that for music, right? You're doing that, difference of generations. It was me coming home from church, listening to Casey Kasem, Top 40, and dying to hear any of the stories behind the songs, to quote, and loving that. And one of the things that you guys do that I tell the story often when we're talking about TV shows. I do a couple other podcasts. I do like a Doctor Who podcast and a Babylon 5 podcast and the Game of Thrones podcast. And for Christmas one year, my son and my wife got me they enrolled me in a leisure learning class that was happening at SMU. And it was a 6-week course, happened once a week. And it was the Prime Directive, Star Trek, Next Generation, and the Prime Directive. And the course was you watched a 45-minute Next Generation episode, and then you discussed it. And in the very first day, we're talking about this, and someone raises her hand, and she says, well, the reason that happened is because they're actors and you have to have them in the role, right?
Right.
And the professor says, stop. You are correct. Yeah. But for the purpose of this class, we are going to not use that as a reason. We have to in the context of the show, right? And so you guys do a really good job of that. Now you will throw out, they use that word because it rhymed.
Right.
But let's go talk about for another reason, right?
Yeah. We'll often talk about like, what is canon to the song, or, like basically, or even like we just, so the first episode we ever did was The Night the Lights Went Out in Georgia.
Right.
Which was a big part of the sort of the origin of the show. And then we redid it. And the one thing I sort of mentioned that was different from the first time until the most recent time was just that we were gonna make that song make sense. If we had to invent stuff, if we had to add, characters and situations that were not mentioned in the song, just because the song itself doesn't actually add up. But if you sort of take everything that's happening in the song at its word, like, okay, and like you said, in reality, it was just that they probably just didn't think about it that much.
Right.
I don't think anyone really sort of cared to even try to like figure out whether or not the actual mystery made sense. Right. But if you go, okay, well, that we're gonna say that all this is real and just kind of try to figure out how to make this make sense. Yeah. Which I find to be a ton of fun.
Yeah.
to do.
So how did you find your two cohorts? You said you guys known each other in high school.
Yeah.
So Rachel and Michael, how did you guys have a class together? Were you sitting together at lunch and went, hey, I like story songs too?
Yeah, I mean, we were all in the drama club together.
Okay.
We were all, the weird performer drama club kids. And honestly, it was just sort of hanging out, before rehearsal, after rehearsal, waiting for our part, and we would just talk. We would just talk about stuff. And, we quickly figured out we liked the same stuff. And yeah, and like I said, we would just talk. And then the origin of the show is that we all went on a cruise together. And we've talked about this on the show, but we all went on a cruise together. And one night, there was a storm, and the ship was like rocking like crazy. On a side note, as far as I know, this is one fun fact about me. As far as I know, it is impossible for me to get motion sickness.
Oh, wow.
I've never
put that on the bragging montage.
yeah. I've never gotten motion sickness. I can get dizzy if I spin around a lot, but I don't get sick the way I know other people do. So anyway, I felt like I had a bit of like almost survivor's guilt because everyone else was miserable. They were so sick, and I was fine. But we went back to one of our rooms, and we were just drinking some wine, and we just started talking, and we got onto, I don't remember how it came up, but we started talking about the Nightlife Song Georgia, and we started going through the lyrics. I think somebody maybe had it on their phone or something, and we kept listening to it over and over again and just walking through the lyrics. And we just had a grand time. And that discussion was probably 2 hours of us breaking down and try to make the song make sense. And then we just started talking about other story songs that we knew, like Billy Don't Be a Hero, or Cats in the Cradle, and just trying to break those songs down. And I don't know how it happened, but we were just sort of like, this is so fun. And I think somebody mentioned doing a podcast, and this was over 10 years ago. So podcasts were not what they are today.
Right.
They still were sort of a niche thing. They were not as professional, as they are today. And so we're like, yeah, let's just do it. It would be fun. And we kind of just did it as an experiment, and it was super fun. Like I said, we originally were going to do the backstory just because we kind of wanted to fill out the episodes a little bit, and doing the backstory very quickly became, if not, as much fun, maybe even a little bit more fun of doing the lyrics breakdown. So that it all turned out, great. But I think one thing that obviously the fact that we've known each other for so long, and we can anticipate what the other person is going to say for the most part. Although one of the best things is when one of those two say something that totally surprises me, which they can still manage to do. But both Rachel and I had done improv comedy in New York. I was at the Upright Citizens Brigade for many years when I was as a young man in my 20s. And one of the great things about improv comedy, which is why I loved it when I did it, was if somebody throws something out in an improv scene, every idea is a good idea. And so if somebody says something, it is your job to make what they just said better and make sense and be funnier. And then, on the other side, it's their job to make whatever you're doing better and funnier. And so I think that's one of the great things about the podcast is any idea that gets thrown out there, I think everyone is quick to add on to it, to say, oh, that's a great idea. And, here's what's even going to make it better. So we can very quickly kind of fun ideas and kind of stack on top of each other, which is really great. So, I think that's really what helps the show, is that basically no one ever says no. If you throw out the dumbest, craziest idea about, oh, I think this line means this, the other two people, my two co-hosts, are going to support me and are going to go, oh yeah, that's a really great idea, and here's why. And sometimes especially I like to occasionally do, make fun of myself and sort of undercut it. But for the most part, I even know that I can do that and be, totally comfortable and safe with those guys, because they're always going to support me, and vice versa. So I think that is a big part of what makes the show great, just that we've known each other for so long, and we know what we like, we know what we're good at, we know what the other people are good at, and we can kind of really play to our strengths.
Yeah, I do think that is part of the reason why I find it so charming and entertaining, is you guys are not afraid to take it to the extreme. And you guys, I think, have mentioned on the podcast about doing improv, but you, a lot of callbacks in the same episode, right?
Mhm.
Like, and I was making the joke about Joan, right? Or somebody like, and a dirty bandana, and like, why didn't you wash the bandana? And like 10 minutes later, you will mention, and we've still got a dirty bandana, when we're talking about Janis Joplin's classic.
Right.
So it is, you could tell you guys are having fun, and you are being very serious about a non-serious thing.
Yeah.
Um, one of my favorite, and I don't want this to be, I'm basically, Saturday Night Live. Remember that time you did that?
Yeah.
That was great. But with the Breakfast at Tiffany, you guys went on this whole thing like she doesn't even know who this guy is.
Right.
Right. And he's got this whole thing in his mind
Yeah.
that they've connected. And you guys just went on a whole different, like, you didn't go with the romantic or anything. This was just, I happened to walk by the common room and I went, oh, yeah, I guess that's a good movie. And now you've built this imaginary thing. You're a stalker.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
was, that is, I think, one of the things that you never know where you're going to take it. You guys took a break, though. You guys kind of, I guess, real life gotten ahead is what I would guess.
Yeah. So the story with that is that, I mean, basically, we had done it for a little over a year. And, for one thing, like I said, podcasts were just not what it was.
Right.
It
Exactly.
was just a fun thing. I don't know if we even knew anyone was listening. Like we were just sort of doing it for ourselves. My daughter was born, and around the same time I got a very demanding, stressful job, and I just couldn't keep up. And so I said, okay, well, let's take a break for a couple of months so I kind of get my feet under me. That was a mistake. What I would say to anyone who does something like this, my advice would be just don't ever stop. Just don't ever stop doing it. And originally we put out the show once a week. And now we do it every other week. And in retrospect, if I could go back in time, that's what we should have done. We should have just said, all right, we'll do it every 2 weeks, or we'll do it once a month or whatever. Because once you stop, it's just so hard. It's just so hard to get back into it, because you go, okay, well, we'll do it. All right, well, we'll talk about it next month. All right, we'll do it next month. And, 1 month becomes a year, and then 2 years. And then, and then it gets harder and harder, because you're like, well, is anybody going to care about this? We actually, we had,
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was going to say, right, Dan, that it is, first off, your daughter is the Yoko, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. No, but it is that it's one of those things where you mentioned to me behind the scenes, you said, Jesse, do you want just me? Because trying to get the three of us together at the same time to record our podcast is tough, much less a second podcast. And I totally understand, because I've done that too. You're trying to get everyone together, and you're trying to be, real world gets involved. So the other thing I wanted to mention is one of the things little Steven has talked about, is, he left the E Street Band right before Born in the USA came out. Mm-hmm. And he said it was the dumbest financial decision he ever made. Now, creatively, he, in his book, he talks about he did a lot of things creatively. He did a lot of work. Not only, I'm not going to play Sun City, but a lot of work to help end apartheid. For a rock and roll guy, it's not bad. He said, but financially, we've worked all this time, and then I step away. And so he now tells bands, never break up. Yeah. Fine, keep the band. All of you go do your solo material, go do whatever you want, but never officially break down the band. And then 2 years, 4 years, 5 years, come back, and then you can do again, because the magic of a band is something special. And so I totally agree with you. I tell everyone, I said, look, there is 1% of 1% people making a living off podcasting. It's not going to happen. Do it because you like it. Do it because you have fun. Do it because you and your co-host enjoy each other's company. And if you get listeners, that's a bonus.
Yeah.
So I at least that's how I feel. How about you?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And do it, like you said, I mean, unless you're very, very lucky, or you're already famous,
Yeah.
you're not gonna get rich doing this, even if you make a little bit of money. So
Yeah.
do it for yourself, do it,
Yeah.
and do it at a pace that you can. And,
Right.
and be honest, like if you get busy, like I said, drop down to a month,
Yeah.
or once a month or whatever. Just don't ever, because once you stop, even when you stop, like with the band, I mean, I've never been in a band, but I can imagine it's a mental thing too, where it's like, once you've broken up the band, then you have to get the band back together. If the band still exists, even though you're not having made music in 5 years, it's a lot easier to be like, okay, well, let's just get everyone back in the studio. Yeah. And that was the thing too. Like if we had sort of kept doing it, but on, a lesser schedule, it would have been easier to then, like, once things were a little easier, to kind of get back and speed up and maybe, all right, we'll go back to once a week or whatever. But since we had stopped, it just was sort of, it's out of sight, out of mind. It's really hard. So, if you like doing it, like I said, just don't stop. Because I mean, that's the thing too, I mean, I was younger then, I was impulsive, and I was like, oh, I can't do this. Just kind of quit. And there's a couple other things. I mean, I don't know if thankfully is the right word, but I never had a little Steven situation. I don't think I ever quit anything where I ended up losing out on some serious money, but I did also kind of impulsively quit things that I regret now, so it's kind of, like I said, just don't ever stop. Just don't ever quit. Just, you can take a step back, but if you like doing it, you'll regret it, because life just goes right by, it'll, like I said, 1 year becomes 2 years, becomes 5 years. And then the longer it goes on, you're like, well, how could we ever go back now?
What led to y'all coming back? Okay.
I just want to shout out one thing. We had one fan from the original show who would reach out to me every once in a while and ask when the show's coming back. Her name is Emily Prokop. It was incredibly supportive. And so that actually kind of was the one thing when Rachel and Mike are like, we should do the show again, was sort of in the back of my mind, was like, well, one person liked it. There was one person out there, so maybe we should. And that's the other thing too, like, don't ever be afraid to reach out. You never know, what your words, telling someone how much you like something is going to mean to them, especially in something like this. I mean, we're not rich and famous off of it. We had no idea if anyone had ever listened to the show other than, like, my mom. So, that was great. And, and getting back into it now, we've just done over 100 episodes. I think we originally had done maybe 50 or 60. So we've been doing it way longer, now. And yeah, it's great. I mean, it's a thing that I look forward to. I love doing it. And yeah, and the other thing too is, I mean, now we're all busy people. There's a good chance that the three of us, maybe would have drifted away, not talked as often. I mean, I have friends that, that's happened to. So just having an excuse to have to be together all the time, at least every other week is great.
Yeah, I have similar stories. The Skip and Josh podcast up in Canada, Skip's been on the podcast a couple of times. He talked about him and Josh would call every Saturday when they used to be roommates. They moved away, and every Saturday morning they would call and talk. And finally, one of them said, "Well, we ought to just record this." Yeah. And they did that. Back when Battlestar Galactica was still a thing, the Galactic Quorum, they all worked at the same office, and they talked about Battlestar Galactica at their lunch hour, and they decided, we might as well record this. Yeah. So Karen Lou and I were friends in a podcast maybe 6-7 years ago, and we remained friends via email and talking. And he got Babylon 5, a set of Babylon 5 podcasts for Christmas, and said, I've never watched it, don't you like that show? And I go, yeah, I do too. And Karen's like, I've never seen it either. Okay, why don't we do a podcast again as an excuse? And so that is my 10 a.m. Sunday morning. We sit down, the three of us, and it's an excuse for us to visit. And it's just, it's a lot of fun. I don't want to bore anyone else, but I love the thought of the mechanics. Who picks the song? Who decides who's doing the research? Who takes lead? Do you guys rotate it? Is it dealer's choice? It's like, okay, well, Michael, you're the one who wanted to do tie a yellow ribbon around the Odo tree. You take lead on this. How do you guys do that?
That is something we sort of fell into where, we'll pick the song, we'll pick one song, and then the person who, whose song that is, will do the research, and we do, I'll do one, then Rachel, then Michael, and then back to me, and around. We do have meetings. We do have podcast meetings where we will throw out, like, I want to do this song, I want to do that song. I don't think we've ever rejected a suggestion. Usually sometimes we'll just sort of structure it and say, well, it might be better. We have like 3 70s singer-songwriter songs in a row. Let's, move some around or whatever, so that it's mix it up a little bit. But otherwise, I mean, there's no method to the madness, really. Usually we'll just, we'll say, oh, it's my turn. This is the song I'm going to do. We have a list of songs, definitely. But usually what'll happen is I'll just be listening to the radio. In my house, I have like several smart speakers. I always have music on, like literally any time of the day. I work from home. I just listen to music the entire time that I'm working. And every once in a while I'll just hear a song and think, oh, we got to do this one. That happened with You're So Vain. I walked into the kitchen, that song was playing, and I was like, oh, I cannot believe we haven't done this song. Obviously it's like perfect for the show. So that's the thing. Like, that's my method is, I'll just hear something and I'll be like, oh yeah, I want to do that. So I have a couple, that I have in mind, for coming up. Usually I like to have a take, on a song, and I actually was going to save this until we got there. But I'll tease it now. The one reason why we've never done a Bruce song on the show is honestly, it's too good. I don't know what I would say, really. I mean, most of his songs are story songs to one degree or another, but a lot of times I don't know what I would say. I don't really have like a fun thing other than like, this song is great. Other than that, there's not really a ton to say about it. And that doesn't mean we do bad songs. We pretty much every song we do, we like, but like You're So Vain is a perfect example. Like, there's so much detail in there, and the mystery of who could it be. Like, that's such an easy, take on that. So yeah, that's usually what it is. It's just if there's some kernel of an idea there that I can kind of latch onto. That's usually why when I pick the songs. And in some ways, the fact that the songs are so random is great, because then the backstories are all over the place. We sort of have this splatter of a or it's like a map where it's like little pins. We're sort of like slowly, randomly, covering the history of popular music in the 20th century, but sort of like completely out of order, because we're jumping from eras to different parts of the country and stuff. We're doing country, we're doing hip hop, we're doing rock over here. So yeah, it's really like I said, we're definitely not like, oh, we need to do this song because it'll be popular, and if we did that, we would never do songs like Pearl's a Singer or anything. There's definitely no like kind of cynical method to try to game the system or anything. We just pick songs we like.
Well, for a great example is when I was watching last year's Rock and Roll Hall of Fame award ceremony, at the end, everyone joined Dolly Parton on doing Jolene, right? And you guys all talked about the beauty of Jolene, how freaking amazing that story is. And you go back to, and how good looking is she that Dolly Parton feels ugly. But, I think that is one of the things that there is not a mean-spiritedness in your discussion ever. Now, there are a couple songs, the 50s tragic songs, it's a little tougher to talk about, the greatness of Seasons in the Sun or Tell Laura I Love Her. Not that they're not great songs, but it is a little bit easier to have fun with it versus like, Operator by Jim Croce. You're like, this freaking lyrics they're poetry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And like I said, I mean, we've never done a song that like we totally hate. But yeah, I mean, we just, that's the other thing too, that we tell people all the time is like, we're just having fun. Like we're not,
exactly.
We're not out to make fun of anyone, or, we're analyzing to a degree that most of these songs were never meant to be analyzed to. And we know that that's part of the fun that, even you were saying with the Star Trek class, like this, the reason why this is the way it is probably because on the day they realized they didn't have an answer to why the warp drive, and they're like, all right, let's just do this and let's get it over with because we got to, film 6 more episodes this season. But, in reality, when you're watching the show, you don't know the backstory like that. So you're sort of just taking it as it comes. And same thing here. Like, I just love music so much, and any kind of music. And so just having fun with it is just the most important thing.
Yeah. And I think what's beautiful is asking those questions. And there's the icebox questions is what Alfred Hitchcock called it, right? That you go to the cinema, you have a great time, you love the film, you get up in the middle of the night for a snack, and it's icebox, tell you the dates, right? And as you're getting a piece of pie, you go, hey, wait a minute, why did this,
Right.
And I think that could be some of those, because let's go back to the origin, right? In my mind, Night the Lights Went Out in Georgia, I was like, oh, there was a lynching. That's why she didn't have time to stop it. But then when you start looking, well, then why would there have been a judge and a prosecutor and wait a minute, and so to tear that down, I did love that, Reba McEntire fixed it all in a video.
Yes.
Which has nothing to do with this. I mean, she does the song, but she's like, oh, we'll change the sound. So that's great. I take it you guys are just going to keep doing this as long as it's fun?
Yeah, hopefully. We definitely don't have any plans to stop anytime soon.
Yeah.
I don't know.
How did you guys get with the network, with Pantheon?
That's actually a really funny story.
Okay.
So what happened was we did an episode on a song called Old Red, which is about a convict who there's a dog called Old Red, and anyone who escapes from this jail, the Old Red tracks him down. And so he uses a female dog to distract Old Red and gets away. That's the story of the story song. And it was I don't remember if it was a cover or not, but the version we did was by Blake Shelton. And so one day, I go on the website, or I go on the place where we post the podcast, and I noticed that download numbers are going up like crazy. It's like 3 times, 4 times the amount of downloads we normally have. So I text Michael and Rachel. I'm like, hey, you guys see the download numbers? It's crazy. And then it just like keeps going, and it's just like getting crazier and crazier. And what we found out was he didn't tag us. This is why we missed it. But Blake Shelton tweeted about the episode. He said, hey, these guys did this fun episode about my song Old Red or whatever. And so people were downloading it like crazy. And then what happened was the network on Pantheon, we had put out a tweet being like, oh my God, thank you, Blake Shelton, whatever. And then they had liked it, and I think they even retweeted it. And so I just DM'd and said, hey, and then I read it, and it said that Pantheon was a podcast network just for podcasts about music. So I just said, hey, we do this podcast if you're interested, whatever. And they were like, oh yeah, we listened to it. It sounds great. We love it. If you want to, meet with us and possibly join the network. And that's how it happened. And it was great because that being on the network is, a hard thing to do, but it's awesome because we just had so much support from them. And there's so much stuff like we do have, they do the ads and the the hosting and all that stuff. Like just there is a lot. I mean, as much as podcasting is great and it's fun, there's a lot of headaches. There's a lot of stuff like when you have to do it totally by yourself. So just them having that, and then they cross promote a lot, so we do get a lot of traffic that way. People coming from other podcasts on the network, and those guys they're actually really great. We're really happy with the network. The two guys who run it, they're also like really like straightforward. Up to including sometimes they'll be like, look guys, we mess something up, like we'll take care of it, and so yeah, it's been really great. It's really fun. But yeah, that was the craziest thing. That was the other crazy story, just that Blake Shelton had tweeted about us out of nowhere. And obviously when someone like that, even if just it's a random thing, all of a sudden you have thousands and thousands of downloads out of nowhere, which was really great. Yeah, the only other person to do that was Ariel Friedman. I'm sorry, Dean Friedman from the song Ariel. Apparently listened to our episode, and he was a little less enamored with us. But although I love that song, I absolutely love that song. That is another one that I discovered just out of the blue. And the first time I heard it, I was almost jumped for joy. I was like, this is the best, most bizarre song I've ever heard. Just for your audience at home, it's just about a guy who like goes on a date with a girl, but it is just the most long, rambling, and if you want to talk about details, he just goes into every tiny little detail of this like pretty mundane, I mean, I'm sure they had fun, but pretty mundane date, and he just every possible detail about them going to Dairy Queen, and she only eats onion rings. It's a whole, it's great. It's the best.
It is one that I have not listened to yet, so I will kind of move that in the
front
of my queue. Yeah, that is great. Yeah, I know what you're saying. I started out in a network, and the guy decided that he wanted to get out of the business anymore, and he just was tired, so he kind of gave us the rights, and so I'm now one of those that do it all myself, and I didn't mind. I edited anyway, but it is sometimes you miss that that camaraderie, like, hey, it's podcast month, it'd be nice if we could do some exchange. And so that's why I reach out to a lot of people like yourself, in other words, going, hey, do you want to be on the podcast? I want to promote your podcast. I want to joy and talk about it. I'm going to get to Bruce, I promise listeners, but I had a couple other questions. You've now worked into a really nice rhythm. Tell us the story behind the song. You guys break it apart. You take your break. You come back. You give a concise, but it way back in high school, this is so out of date. But so I changed the sex so that it isn't as biased. But when we asked our chemistry teacher, it's an essay question, how long does it need to be? And he said, but I'm changing the sex, it should be like a men's kilt, short enough to be interesting, but long enough to cover the subject. So that's what you guys do, I think. And I love when you go, okay, look, we do not have time to talk about Dolly Parton, everything here, but we'll go through. And then, you guys do shared universes and lesson learned. Seems like lesson learned was from the very beginning, but shared universe was something that developed, I take it?
Yeah, I mean, that's a perfect example of, I forget how it came up, but I think Michael just was like, oh, this song, there's a character in this song who's similar to this character, maybe they're the same person. And I jokingly said, oh, are you proposing a story song shared universe? And we sort of went on a run with that. And then after the episode, I finished, I think even after we were done recording, we were just talking about it, like, oh, that shared universe thing was really funny. And I was like, well, maybe we should just do that all the time, And it was a thing where, like, if we had done it a few times and then it sort of petered out, it would have been fine. But that's another thing that's like one of my favorite parts of the show now, is that we pretend that, and this is not, this is now completely
inside baseball, yes, but yes.
Well, I was gonna say, yeah, we pretend that every song is connected. They all take place in the same universe, and that the characters are, crossing paths. I mean, we just like I almost spoiled something that's coming up, but we did a song where a character's on a train, in an upcoming episode, and we say, oh, that's the train that's going by Folsom Prison, and he's waving to Johnny Cash out the window, so it's that sort of stuff.
That's where the gambler is playing poker at the end.
Yes,
right.
We talk about
yes, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
And so
So and that's the thing too. Like, obviously there's a lot of like recurring motifs or whatever. So things all mixed up. But that's a good example I was talking about. Where like that was just an idea thrown out, and it was totally supported. And like every idea is a good idea. So we're gonna try to make it into a thing. Like I wouldn't be surprised if something else comes along in the future like that.
What's perfect, right, is you guys don't, I guess maybe sometimes bend it, but usually it's pretty thing. Like, and it was Wildfire the horse. Well, of course it was, right?
Yeah.
All right. All right. So you did mention that you are at least a casual fan of Bruce. So by the way, are you okay on time?
Oh yeah, I'm fine.
Okay, great. So let's talk a little bit about, do you remember when you first heard Bruce's music, and if it spoke to you, why did it? And it sounds like you were just talking about one of the reasons he's not made it, though I could see Highway Patrolman, Hungry Heart. I mean, there's just tons of them that could be great on your podcast.
I think we'll definitely get there now, especially now that I'm thinking about it. I mean, Bruce, he's definitely an artist who I probably take for granted. I like everything that he's ever done, I was, he's always been around. I was 6 years old, I think, when Born in the USA came out. And so those songs have always been there. I think I probably rediscovered him maybe in college, where I sort of really started paying attention to the songs, and the lyrics are incredible. And some of the longer ones, sort of like blues jams or whatever they are. As a teenager, I mean, I liked them. I just wasn't like it wasn't really my thing. But as I sort of got older and got into them, I mean, again, I'm almost doing it now where I don't really know what to say other than like it's great. I mean, I not to spoil it for your audience, I'm never going to talk about Thunder Road later. I mean, those, like, we do a lot of talking about like what makes for good lyrics and in a song. I mean, those lyrics they're practically perfect. Like the everything about them is like the ideal of like good song lyrics. And then on top of that, you have obviously an excellent song that they're paired with. So I mean, he's great. I really can't even think of anything else to say about him other than he's such a singular. That's the other thing too. Like he's one of those guys that's just like, he doesn't really fit in with the era that he's from. At least I don't think so. I mean, he's sort of. I don't know of anyone else who's really like him, and yet when you hear it, it's just like, oh yeah, this is just the quality of it is overwhelming. I was like, it's just so good that like obviously he should be a huge star, which he became. So
what's interesting, and obviously I'm biased since I do a podcast about him, but Letter to You, which is his latest album, which is a lot about the death of his he tells the story that his first band lasted 3 years. He was in high school, and he said that's a long time in high school. And he said that a few years ago, the George Thies, who was the leader of the band, died of lung cancer, and Bruce hit him. It hit to Bruce that he was the last man alive from that high school band. And so that kind of, he wrote the song Last Man Standing, and this other songs in Letter to You, which I don't know if you checked out, but I recommend you highly. It's all about grief and endings, and also beginnings, because the newest phase. And I'm there are certainly kids or fans that will say, well, it'll never be good as Born to Run album or Darkness on the Edge of Town, but at 71 to put out an album that is that fresh, that unique, is pretty impressive.
Oh, absolutely. And it's also one of those things where, like, definitely as I'm getting older, like, I get it. I mean, there was a time when I didn't know anyone who had died, and now, unfortunately my dad passed away a few years ago. I've known a couple people who've died, and you start to get that feeling of like, oh man, like
Yeah.
so many people are gone. You can't, you understand it when you're young intellectually, but it isn't until you get there that, you really like start to understand it on an emotional, almost primal level.
Yeah.
And again, someone like him, I mean, to be honest, I haven't heard that album. I will listen to it. I'm sure I'll like it. But even if even if it's not as good as Born to Run or whatever,
Yeah.
just like you said, the fact that he's still doing it and is still putting himself out there,
Yeah.
it's just great. And I'm sure it's fascinating.
Yeah. If you listen to it and if you had things to think about, I'd love to have you come back on and give a
No, yeah,
perspective.
sure.
Who are some of your favorite go-to artists? It's as much as you love music. Do you have and it sounds like you have a incredibly wide variety of taste, which
Yeah.
shows in the podcast, but are there go-to artists that you think of?
Well, I actually, this I'd like to turn around and ask you a question, because
Sure.
obviously, Bruce is your guy. Michael, on my show, he is a super fan of Madonna,
Mhm.
and always has been, and can rattle off every album she's done, in order or whatever. Rachel is really into this band called the Mountain Goats. So it's really just one guy, but she's seen them at concerts a bunch of times. I've never really had that.
Okay.
Never really had. Like I said, I'm such an omnivore. I'm just always
Okay.
listening to everything. I definitely have my favorites. I mean, I love David Bowie. Every era of Bowie, I think, is just great. Elvis Costello. Yeah, I just, and I sort of like, I'm kind of more into like, genres.
Sure.
Another thing I will do is if I hear a song and I really like it, especially now in sort of the Spotify era, I'll just like put on a playlist of like every album of that artist and just listen to it for 2 weeks and just like, and then just feel like, okay, I got it. Like
Yeah.
I understand that. I actually just did that with Lucinda Williams, the country artist. But yeah, I've just never like, I've never had that. And even up to the fact that like, as much as I like music, I haven't like relatively been to very many concerts, just because I'm always kind of like on to the next thing. Like I've
Yeah.
never felt kind of the urge to do that. So my question to you is like, how did it happen for you? Like what made you sort of decide that, Bruce Springsteen, as great as he is, it's,
Yeah.
and by the way, a great choice, because not only has he put out nothing but good music, I don't think he's ever done like a bad album or
Yeah.
anything. He also never said anything that you need to like apologize for. So, but good job on your end for picking it. But well, what caused that to happen?
So, thank goodness you're okay on time. Tell me what you get. I hope you're enjoying the conversation. I'm having a blast.
Absolutely.
So it starts in phases. So, I went to high school in the 70s. So that's why all your 70s songs just speak to my heart, right?
Yeah.
I remember loving these songs, and but and I went through a Kiss phase, and obviously, Queen and Barry Manilow and Foreigner and all the 70s bands. And in 1977, I graduated high school. I walked into a Montgomery Ward's back when they sold music, when there was a Montgomery Ward's.
Yeah.
And I picked up a Beach Boys 8-track Endless Summer. And Dan, I had never heard something like that in my life. And I became obsessed with the Beach Boys and therefore Brian Wilson.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved y'all Sloop John B episode. It just made my heart sing, because you gave beautiful homage to the song, but also this doesn't make any sense, right? So I stayed a really big fan of Brian Wilson and the Beach Boys. And then, like everyone else, like in 1980, when The River came out, I recognized My wife, who I was dating at the time, had a friend who went to school in the East Coast, and she came back talking about this guy, Bruce Springsteen. And I bought The River, and I liked Hungry Heart. And then, like everyone else, I bought Born in USA. I didn't buy Nebraska. And, everyone was loving Born in the USA, and I liked Tunnel of Love. And then 89, we have our son. We quit going to music. We're just, you're busy trying to pay the bills and do things. We discovered the local, we moved to Dallas in 86. Around 88, we discovered local Dallas musics. So there's a company called Brave Combo that's from Denton that does rock and roll polkas, which is
I know Brave Combo. That's great. I know Brave Combo. That's great.
Yeah, we used to go see them live all the time. In fact, my son, when he was like 7 or 8, like, Dad, it's always a good time to polka.
I love it.
And so Sarah Hickman was also growing up in there, and we've got to be friends with her. And then 9/11 happened.
Okay.
And they had the telethon, and it opened with Bruce Clarence singing My City of Ruins. And I went, holy shit, what is that? And then in 2002, I went to my first Bruce show live. Okay. And Dan, I believe there's two kinds of people in the world. The people that go to a Bruce show that go, damn, that was long. And two, that go, oh my goodness, when can I do this again?
Yeah.
And so that happened. And then, so started being a bigger fan. And then I started podcasting. I was doing a Farscape podcast, and then a friend of mine asked me to do a Castle podcast with the ABC show with Nathan Fillion, because I was a big Firefly fan. And then the guy who owned our network at the time said, we don't have a Doctor Who podcast. I like you, Jesse. I guested on a couple of podcasts. Do you want to do a Doctor Who podcast? So we did. And so two things happened. One, Lynette Carolla, who was married to Adam Carolla at the time, did 4 or 5 episodes where she interviewed friends of her and Adam who were huge Bruce fans.
Okay.
And I
actually remember this. Yeah.
And I loved that discussion.
Okay.
It was just fascinating. Then she stopped doing them. And then the Springsteen and I documentary came out, which was all fans sending messages. So in the spirit of lighting a candle instead of cursing the darkness, I went, there isn't a Bruce Springsteen podcast. I should do one. Okay. So I went to the owner of our podcast, and he loves to tell the story. His name is Rob Southgate. And I go, Rob, I want to do a Springsteen podcast. He goes, okay, what's a Springsteen podcast? I said, I'm going to talk to fans of Springsteen's music, and we're just going to have a discussion. He goes, okay, where are you going to find him? I said, I'm going to find him on social media. He says, okay, hey. And, at the time, and he still believes this, but he was, if you're passionate about something, do a podcast about it.
Yeah.
So he hang up the phone, and he looks to Martha, who's his wife, and says, Jesse's going to do a Bruce podcast. I think we'll get a season out of it. And to him, a season is 12 episodes. In March, I will hit my 1,000th episode.
Oh my God.
I have been doing this since 2015.
Oh, that's great.
I have had people from around the world. I have had someone from Russia. I've had Australia, South America, just Canada, the US, Europe, and I'm going strong. So
yeah, it's great.
And so between being obsessed with the music, then starting the podcast, they feed each other. And so Friday night, I saw him in Dallas. Tomorrow night, I'm seeing him in Houston. Thursday, I'm seeing him in Austin. And next Tuesday, I'm seeing him in Tulsa.
Oh, that's great. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. The live show must be incredible.
Yeah, and I do recommend, if you have this tour, and tickets are expensive, but if you can find a ticket, you and your lovely bride go, and then you might come back and go, well, it was long, Jesse. Or you both go, okay, I get it. Yeah.
I mean, I can, I'll definitely, it's probably even harder for me, even though I live on Long Island.
Yes.
50 miles west of here is New Jersey, and they come pouring over the border
Yes, they do. Yes,
whenever
they
he's
do.
doing a show around here.
Yes,
So
they do. Yeah.
it'll be even harder. But no, and that's the other thing too. I mean, obviously growing up, around here with the whole New Jersey
Yeah.
thing, and people love him here too. Yeah, it was always kind of an omnipresent thing.
So what I love
that's great.
though is I love the wide diversity. I'll tell you the truth, Dan, and I may cut some of this out. I don't trust people that go, yeah, I don't have a favorite musician.
Right.
Now you go, I have too many. And I go
do.
through genres, right? That's good.
Yeah.
But someone goes, I'm just not that powerful. Man, music's just not important to me. Really?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely important to me. That's the thing. Like you said,
Yeah.
I just like it too much. And, I know it's a cliche when someone says, well, what kind of music you like? And they go, I like all kinds of music. And it's like, come on. But I mean, I certainly like some music better than others. But yeah, I really do like pretty much everything. Like I said, I was never good about staying, in my genre or whatever. I was always listening to other stuff. It's so funny you mentioned Brave Combo. I forget.
I gotta know, how did you find them? Do you remember?
I don't remember. I think it might have been. I had a college radio show in college, and I think somehow I came across them. But my wife and I drove across country for our honeymoon when we got married. We drove from New York to California, and we stopped at the Polka museum, the Polka Hall of Fame museum.
Yeah.
And I was just looking through they had, I was at a gift shop, and I was looking through the racks, and I found a Brave Combo CD, and I was like, oh my god, like I remember these guys from college or whatever. And so I bought it. I still have it. It's back there on my shelf somewhere.
But and they're still playing.
That's great.
Yeah.
So
and
awesome.
What's hilarious is they've actually been nominated and won a Grammy for Best Polka Album, which I just think is funny that this guys who started doing rock and roll polka, they backed Tiny Tim once,
Okay.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, that is great.
That's so fun.
Yeah, that is awesome. Anything I should have asked you that I haven't?
Not that I can think of. Sorry, I know I've been talking
no.
off, but
no, you haven't at all. I appreciate it. That's great. All right. To give you a little behind the scenes, or my listeners, Jay Armstrong is a recently retired English teacher. He did honors English, and every year for his seniors, he would take Thunder Road, break it apart as a poem, and would talk about the themes, talk about the imagery, talk about the lyrics, and then at the end of the 2 days he would ask the class, does Mary get in the car? So that has become my shtick. Everyone who joins me, I ask them to end the podcast that question. So Dan, that is your question. Does Mary get in the car at the end of Thunder Road?
My first thought, I would say, is I certainly hope so.
Okay.
Bruce, he's a good-looking guy. He's got a car. He plays guitar. He definitely seems like it'd be a fun time. So yeah, I hope so. I mean, and also, my philosophy in life I try to live by is, to go for it, to play the hand you're dealt. He's outside. So yeah, I got a good feeling about Mary. I think she definitely went with them. Yeah.
Very nice. I appreciate that. All right. If someone wants to reach you and the show, please plug away.
Okay. So yeah, it's the Story Song Podcast. You can find it wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to go to the Story Song Podcast, thestorysongpodcast.com, or just Google it, you'll find us. We're story_song on Twitter. We're Story Song Podcast on Instagram. I know we're on Facebook. I don't use Facebook, so I don't know how to find it. But if you do, just search Story Song Podcast, you'll find it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say, and the thing I always tell people is the content is evergreen for the most part. So, when you go on, find a song that that you like, give it a listen, and if you like that, then maybe go forward, find another song. And honestly, you can pretty much bounce around. It's not listening in order is really not all that important. Especially you might be in August and come across a Christmas song or a Christmas episode. So yeah, and like I said, just check it out. Hopefully you like it. you know, we just try to have fun. So don't be worried. We're not going to make fun of your favorite artist or your favorite song, even if we have a little fun with it. You know, we're just here to have fun. We overanalyze. You know, one of our original taglines is "We overthink it, so you don't have to." So just sit back and enjoy. Yeah, and Jesse, thank you so much. I cannot thank you enough for having me on the show. It's been great.
Well, Dan, I appreciate it. This is all to make up for me calling you Don in my review that you
That's
guys
okay.
mocked horribly, which I felt such bad.
Oh
And
no,
iTunes would not let you edit. Like I'd like
that's fine.
yeah, no, you guys had a blast with it. Yeah, I want to stress that there is during lockdown, you can tell it's during lockdown, and you guys make a couple of comments about that, but overall this is very evergreen, and I'm going to echo what Dan says. There is any genre, you're going to find a song to go, oh, I always liked that song, and listen to it. And if you like it, you will like the rest of them. And I do think you'll like it because they're all very funny. And there is also, what I love is there is a lot of respect to the musicians. And you guys talk about the writers of the music, the lyrics, and the artist who performs it. And it is a one of my favorite podcasts is History of Rock and Roll in 500 Songs, and also, you know, Cocaine and Rhinestones, which are both wonderful history podcasts. And you guys are kind of the National Lampoon version of, you know, right? Like, we're going to tell
Yeah,
you the history too, but we're going to have a little fun with it.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. So
All right.
yeah.
All right, hold tight. Listeners, go check out the podcast. Go to iTunes, rate and review, or wherever you get your podcasts, give them a rating. It really does make a difference to us podcasters. One, it's nice to know that people are listening. Two, it helps that thingamabob that we don't really understand about logistics and the mathematic. The more it is, the easier people are to find us. Be safe, be kind, and we'll talk to you soon. Goodbye. I'm about to play the credits and how to reach me, but I want to give a shout out to my patrons. These are the people that kick a few bucks in every month to help the podcast continue. So thank you to Mary, Chris, Anna, Terry, Dale, Steve, Stephen, Levi, Betsy, John, Bella, Crystal, Rob, Ghost of Floyd FD, Steve, Fernando, and Yetta. Thank you guys. You are my angels, and I appreciate you. If you want more information about becoming a patron of the podcast, go to patreon.com and search for Set Lusting Bruce. Now, thank you, and here comes the credits. There we go, another episode. I'm about to go through a couple of things where you can reach me and give me feedback. So if you want to skip this, I understand, but I do hope you check it out every once in a while. I'm available on Twitter at Jesse Jackson DFW. The show is available at SetLustingBruce. You can send me an email, setlustingbruce@gmail.com. You can send me a voicemail at 469-249-2442. I am currently doing a few other podcasts. Perfectly Good Podcast, John Hyatt from A to Z, where Sylvan Groth and I discuss every John Hyatt song in alphabetical order. My Babylon 5 podcast is Last Best Hope for Conversation, where Lou, Karen, and I discuss every episode of Babylon 5 in chronological order. I still am doing Next Stop Everywhere, the Doctor Who podcast with my brother in time, Charles Skaggs. And then finally, How Many Podcasts, the only podcast on the internet that counts, where my buddies and I discuss pop culture. You can go to our Patreon page and support the podcast for as little as $1 a month. You can go to our Facebook page, like, and please go to iTunes or wherever you get your podcast and leave a 5-star rating and review for all of the podcasts that I'm doing it's okay if you don't listen to them, but if you subscribe and rate, it really will make my day better. Thank you, and I will talk to you soon.
You just heard the fun talking, hard rocking, music loving, album ranking, fan thinking, joy spreading, lyric reading, story sharing podcast that is the one, the only Set Listing Bruce. The theme for Set Listing Bruce was written by David Rosen, used by permission.